Hello people, it's Jacover back with another video, and what could I talk about now? Well, let's talk about Elvis in Concert, airing on October 3rd, 1977, nearly 2 months after his untimely death. Elvis in Concert is a TV special that shows footage of a man who, even at the near end of his life, tries to still put on an entertaining show for both fans and newcomers alike, while not in the best shape of health or in his prime as he once was, but nonetheless he still puts on a reasonably entertaining show overall. But the show shows you, the viewer, that this is a man who enjoys just flat out singing and entertaining his audience. Whether he's in the best health or not doesn't matter to him, as long as he can put on a great show that will make the audience satisfied. Anyways, let's explain the backstory of Elvis in Concert. By mid-1977, now aged 42, Elvis Presley was seen by many fans and critics alike as a former shadow of himself, in that not only was his health clearly failing, and his shows were seen by many as a parody or a caricature of his former self, who nearly 25 years ago had captivated an audience of young teenagers by wiggling his hips with every beat of the music his band would play, while also being seen by the older establishment at the time as a rebel or menace to society. But these days in 1977, however, he is unfortunately now seen as an aging oldies act, much in the veins of fellow artists from his rock and roll era like Fats Domino, Little Richard and Chuck Berry. Whilst Fats Domino and Chuck Berry mainly didn't really move on or change their sound with the times after their much earlier successes, Elvis Presley, however, was still making music that was ever-changing while not being prioritized towards the older fans or the sound that the older fans had wanted him to go back to, in the sense of his 1950s rock and roll hits. He had now grown into a different direction as an artist, in that with his musical styles and tastes now changing with age and with the times, to a style that was middle of the road country mixed with easy listening ballads and the odd soulful performance in between, and that while he wasn't a main fixture on the top 100 charts anymore like he had once been in the past, he was still, however, charting on other music charts like the country charts with songs like Trouble and Moody Blue, just to name a few examples. But back to the story of Elvis in Concert. On May 1st and 2nd, 1977, Elvis would perform in Chicago, and while doing these shows, they would be attended by a Danish female filmmaker named Annette Wolff, who was most known for her works with Denmark's radio, where she directed numerous in-depth profile documentaries. The reason why she was at these shows in particular at the time is because she wanted to see what an Elvis Presley show was like for an upcoming project she was working on with her crew. And so on June 1st, 1977, it was announced that Presley had signed a deal with CBS for a new TV special which was to be filmed on his next tour that was to happen on June 17th of that same year. The shows she and her crew picked for filming originally were the June 19th, 20th and 21st shows, but unfortunately she was only able to film the June 19th and 21st shows, as due to some issues with obtaining a permit for the venue he was performing at on June 20th. Wolff would later say that she had originally intended to film more footage for a much more deeper look at Elvis's touring life, much in the veins of other Presley documentary films like That's the Way It Is and On Tour, but unfortunately an event would change those plans for her and her film crew when on August 16th, 1977, Elvis would unfortunately be found unconscious and not breathing in his bathroom at his Graceland mansion, to which unfortunately he couldn't be saved and would sadly pass away. So now, with the sad news of his untimely death being made public all around the world, suddenly, because of these events, there was an even higher demand for more Elvis Presley merchandise to be made and more unreleased material to come out. So now, with not much time to waste, Mrs. Wolff and her crew got together and had to quickly edit together a special with a new set television premiere date of October 3rd, 1977 on CBS, which was to come out the same day as the companion album of the same name. Finally, on October 3rd, 1977, the special would air and receive very mixed reviews, with some saying that while Presley wasn't in his 1968 or 1970 prime as he once was, the show still shows a man who literally sacrificed his life all for the love of his audience and as to not disappoint them. While others said that it shouldn't have been made and that RCA and his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, were out for what money they could make with Presley now dead and didn't care about how he looked or sounded in these two shows picked for the special. Since all that is now covered, let's look at Elvis in concert. The show starts off with some fan commentaries talking about their Elvis experiences, while some concert equipment is being prepared for the show we are about to see, which is cool to see in a historical context. But other than that, some of these interviews are like weird as hell. Don't get me wrong, like love a performer because you like their style of performing or how they presented themselves on stage, much like, you know, performers like Michael Jackson and James Brown. But some of these Elvis fans are a bit weird as hell. Like, for example, there's this one particular woman who talks about how just touching Elvis's Graceland gates alone turns her on sexually. Like, okay, that's a cool story. It reminds me of that one part in the That's the Way It Is movie where the one woman talks about how when Elvis kissed her hand during his first season in 1969 in Vegas, she didn't wash her hand for 3 weeks. I shit you not. There's those sort of fans that are out there, if you know what I mean. After all this, we finally get the moment we've been waiting for, which is Elvis getting ready to go on stage with the 2001 A Space Odyssey theme song being played in the background before he gets up on stage to sing his longtime opener, CC Rider or CC Rider Blues, which is an old 1920s 12-bar blues number, if I'm correct. Which he gets into, might I add to this, is that this was edited together from 2 shows filmed, as during the June 19th show, Elvis's vocals were really hoarse and as a result had to be covered up by Charlie Hodges' really awful background singing. And then during the June 21st show, he forgot his timing with the beat, which leads his drummer Ronnie Tutt to starting it back up where they left off. After CC Rider ends, we then get Elvis explaining to the audience that they're on TV as the show is being filmed, and he makes a joke about how they shouldn't be fooled by the lights and cameras around them, which he would joke about at both of these shows filmed. We then go into his 1954 debut release, That's Alright Mama, or That's Alright for short, which is a cover of the old 1946 or 7 Big Boy Arthur Cryptip tune, which had been responsible for kickstarting his success within the South early on in his career. This version, however, presented here, while it may not have that kick, which was the Madison Square Gardens versions, nonetheless, it is still a good version in the sense of it's taken down in a slower tempo, you know, much in the vein of the original recording. We then get another acoustic guitar playing song in the sense of Are You Lonesome Tonight, which I completely understand as to why the editors would decide to edit more fan commentary instead of playing the whole song out, as over the years these June 1977 versions of the songs are notorious for the facts of not only that Elvis messes up the words, but he also misses his cue/timing and sounds very drug affected. Plus tags. Which in 1969, this sort of tongue-in-cheek version would have worked perfectly. What I'm trying to say here is that it would have worked in 1969 because, you know, he was obviously in better health and obviously, you know, was at the top of his game. But in 1977, it just looks really bad here, unfortunately, as obviously, like I said in the intro, Elvis's health was in a serious decline due to his prescription drug abuse, which doesn't help that during the June 19th show, when he talks during the band intros, it sounds very tired, slurred, and sleepy due to being overly medicated. We then get a throwaway version of both Don't Be Cruel and Teddy Bear, and then more fan commentary, yay. The footage cuts back to Elvis singing the Marty Robbins song You Gave Me a Mountain. Originally written for Frankie Lane in 1968, here Elvis makes this song his own. While it's not my favorite Elvis song of all time, I still enjoy it from time to time nonetheless. After Mountain, we get a badly done throwaway version of the 1957 tune Jailhouse Rock from the third movie of the same name, which you can tell he isn't up to singing the very strong, demanding vocals here that this song requires from him. Plus, it doesn't help that he's singing it too fast thus making the words sound unintelligible and muffled due to this very fast tempo. Then we get more fan commentary again, but this part is actually my favorite because you get an African-American gentleman who just loves the fact that Elvis helped blend blues into country and rock music, and isn't on the side of, oh yeah, Elvis was just a racist who stole from black culture, which is total BS, and I have been meaning to make a video about it and debunk some untruths with that narrative about the man. After this, we then get a fantastic performance of How Great Thou Art, which, if you just listened to the audio and didn't see the visual footage of Elvis singing it, you would think this version was from around 1972 to maybe 1975, because his voice actually sounds really good on this in that he isn't sounding badly out of breath. Another song in the special is Early Morning Rain, originally recorded by the song's songwriter Gordon Lightfoot in 1966. Here, Elvis gives a good performance, even if it isn't the full complete version he had done years earlier on the Aloha from Hawaii show. Still, it's a good version nonetheless. During the other band intros after Early Morning Rain, Elvis sings an old country song called I Really Don't Want to Know, originally recorded by Les Paul as in the guitars, which he created, and his wife Mary Ford. Elvis would record this in 1970 for his Elvis Country album, but he started bringing it back into the set list from May 30th of the same year until his last show on June 26, which, while I may not know the exact reasons why for this decision, I think it could have been maybe because he had heard this version of it again due to the Welcome to My World album coming out in March of that year, or that perhaps he was getting nostalgic about his past again, I don't know. After I Really Don't Want to Know, we get Elvis then introducing his father and fiancée Ginger Alden, who would unfortunately be the woman to discover Elvis lifeless on that day. Plus, we also get an amazing, almost operatic version of Hurt, to which we get afterwards the worst throwaway version of Hound Dog I've ever heard. But I know people will say, Chakova, Elvis got sick of this song and didn't like performing it anymore. Which, I mean, he could have just added it to a medley like he did in 1974 for the Memphis shows he did, or he could have just gotten it out of the set list entirely. With Hound Dog now done, we get Elvis introducing and singing My Way, a song originally done in French by Claude Francois in 1967. Paul Anka would then famously rewrite the song in English and give it to Frank Sinatra, who would have a big hit with it when he recorded it in late 1968. But later on, Francois would say that he never got any of the royalties from both Anka and Sinatra and felt cheated due to this fact. But back to the Elvis version of My Way, here he sings it with a lyric sheet which, even though he performed this song a number of times in just 1976 and 7 alone, it seems like he never got quite comfortable with the song, much like Just Can't Help Believing, which he talks about in That's the Way It Is.
I just hope I don't forget the words to I just can't help believing. I hope I don't forget the words. You won't.
To close off the show, Elvis sings his signature song, Can't Help Falling in Love, and here during the song we get footage of his father Vernon talking about his son's career and how, because of the fame and the fans, he struggles to go outside like everyone else without being mobbed by the obvious amount of fans. Plus, he talks about the early days of Elvis's career, but one part of this that makes me cringe really hard is him saying that Colonel Parker is an honest man who wouldn't do anything wrong to him and Elvis at all in the slightest, which is kind of total BS, considering if you've read stories about Elvis's life, in that, well, the Colonel was a good manager in the early years of Elvis's career, you know, like getting him on TV, getting him in the movies, putting him in the army to kind of help his image. In the end, the Colonel kind of f***ed Elvis over, like made him do all those shitty movies for years to a point that Elvis hated doing these movies and would later on say
Hollywood's image of me was wrong, and I knew it, and I couldn't say anything about it. Couldn't do anything about it. I don't know. It's nobody's fault, maybe except my own. I didn't know what to do. I just felt I was obligated very heavily to, a lot of times, to things that I didn't fully believe in. It worried me sick, you know. So I became violently ill, physically, emotionally, everything. And the pictures got very similar, you know. If something was successful, I'd try to recreate it the next time around. The songs were mediocre in most cases, you know. I had thought that they would give me a chance to show some kind of acting ability or do a very interesting story. But it did not change. It did not change.
And the Vegas years, where he'd gamble most of the money he made of his and Elvis's cuts of the earnings from these shows, to which he would then say, well, I'll pay it off by having my boy perform there more and more to cover it. Even especially when Elvis would later on in the 70s complain about how he hated playing Vegas, but had to, as to pay off the Colonel's gambling debts. Plus many other examples I could name off that would make this video last for hours. To end off the special, Vernon says in a later date recorded segment that he's thankful for the support and the kindness that the fans have provided him during this time of grief after his loss of Elvis, his son. After watching, what do I think overall? Well, the special is fine, besides the overuse of fan commentary, but as a general watch overall, it's nothing special, personally, in my honest opinion as an Elvis fan, that while it's still an important part of Elvis's history and life story, considering that this was filmed especially weeks before his untimely death, I don't consider these shows recorded the best performances that Elvis ever gave, but I wouldn't say they're the worst as well, as I think there are many other shows from this period that are very well deserving of that title in my eyes. I kinda wish the editors had kept in Trying to Get to You, which that performance on the Elvis in Concert album is a killer version of the Old Sun recording, plus the live versions of songs like Little Sister and I Love You So are pretty good too actually, and I think they could have fitted well within this special, in my opinion. I know I'll get asked, but do you think these shows should be released officially? In my honest viewpoint, I don't think that they ever will, due to EPE wanting the fans to believe that he literally died right after the Aloha from Hawaii show, which again, I could make a video about my critical negative thoughts about EPE as a whole, which maybe one day I will. Maybe. Anyways, I do think that the shows from the Elvis in Concert special should be released. As for historical context, I think it should be used, much like my thoughts on Baz Luhrmann wanting to do a Get Back style documentary with footage of Elvis from both That's the Way It Is and On Tour, which I'm going to add this right here, right now, as my opinions. While Peter Jackson had hours upon hours of footage recorded during those January 1969 Beatles rehearsal/recording sessions to work with, that told a more cohesive story of how even at that later stage in their careers, all four Beatles could still perform and work together while having their moments of disagreement. Whether it was George feeling like he wasn't being heard more as a musician and a songwriter, John feeling like Paul was trying to control the group, or Paul feeling that he was losing his best mate, being John, as John wanted to grow up and move on with Yoko and leave the group. And Ringo was just sick of all of them fighting and bickering with each other, in that it's all just the music, screw that other stuff, man. But back to Elvis. I feel as that while Baz Luhrmann's documentary idea is cool and interesting, unfortunately, I don't think there won't be much new footage covered in the documentary, as most of the footage from both films is pretty much out there online, and is on YouTube, even if it's in low res or picture quality. Also, what story would Baz Luhrmann try to tell with this documentary? And the footage, especially when it's shot in 2 different years and times in Elvis's life, as to a short period of time like Peter Jackson's Get Back. In 1970, Elvis was in top form and had a lot of energy to show people that, yeah, I can do a badass show and I don't care what people think of me as an entertainer or performer. Unlike as in 1972, you start to see where Elvis is getting bored with touring the same towns and cities day after day. Plus, he's just a sad boy in the On Tour film because he had just separated from his wife Priscilla. As well, you can start to see and feel the effects of what his drug problems were having on him, in the sense of his slurred, tired-sounding speech patterns.
My dad had seen a lot of people who played guitar and stuff who didn't work. So he said, you should make up your mind, he said, about either being an electrician or playing a guitar. He said, I never saw a guitar player that was worth a damn.
And in some footage for the film, he is very puffy in the face and hands. Plus, he's also pale in some of the on-stage shots of the movie. Finally, as for the in-concert TV special, well, I wouldn't have a problem with it being officially released. Like, honestly, I wouldn't care if RCA or Sony BMG decided to one day release a set of these two shows complete. Those shows are very similar in the set list and a majority of the 1977 stuff that is already out there on many different FTD and bootleg recordings, to which I wouldn't go out of my way to buy a set of these Elvis in concert shows Sony released, unless, like, someone gave it to me as a gift for Christmas or my birthday one year. I mean, I'd gladly accept it, but I wouldn't go out of my way as to listen to it in general, unless for research purposes like this video. To end the video off, I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on Elvis in concert and if it should be released officially. Until next time, thanks again, and adios.